Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artist Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more.
Welcome back to another In Focus podcast, brought to you by the artistindex.com. I'm your host, Ron Fortier. And today in our podcast studio, we have a very illustrious guest. You could almost say illuminating, but his work speaks for himself. Guest, would you mind introducing yourself and spelling your name?
Milton Brightman, MiltonBrightman.
Excellent. And that little chime was to tell us that you were going to be here, but you're here already.
Yeah, I left a little early.
Yeah, not a problem, not a problem. I always ask people, and it's a hit or miss kind of a thing, with your last name. I'm assuming that they misspell it. They put B-R-I-T-E or some kind of weird spelling, right, in your last name?
If they do, I'm not aware of it. There's a lot of Brightmans around.
There's a lot of Brightmans around?
A lot of Brightmans around. People ask me all the time, am I related to this one or that one? I can't tell you.
Really?
Unless I know the person, I really don't know.
Yeah. Now, as far as pronouncing it, there's no problems with it, right?
No.
Okay. Because you never know. I mean, there are just some weird quirks. People tell stories all the time about how other people mispronounce their names, and they're just like stunned because they don't understand how could you do that. It's pretty simple.
Right. My name's pretty straightforward if you pronounce it with just two words, Bright Man.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And actually, that kind of is an interesting name because your work is very bright.
Thank you.
It is. I mean, it's almost, we could call you probably a luminist.
I was going to just throw that in. I use a lot of strong color, but you have to use it in a certain way. You know, you can't have it overwhelm you. It has to be done with a darker background, and I bring it up slowly. And
so you work dark to light?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I always find it easier to be on a dark background and come up slowly. And if I'm starting on a white, it's just too much for me. I can't do that.
Now you're, these are the standard questions you ask artists, and again, sometimes you get standard answers. But when did you know that you wanted to be an artist?
Probably my entire life. I don't think I've ever really wanted to do anything else.
Really?
Right.
And you drew for most of your life?
From a child up, you know.
Now you were also a New Bedford, a South End resident for most of your life, is that?
Right. I'm a South End resident to this day.
Okay. We may have even crossed paths when I was going to school down at St. Anne's School, and I lived on Mott Street. I watched them build the wall from my back porch, the hurricane dike.
The hurricane barrier.
Yeah, the hurricane barrier.
I live 2 streets over on Clara Street.
On Clara Street. And I had another friend of mine that I went to school with at SMU, Bob Deck, who lived on Clara Street while he was going to school there as well. The South End, do you think that somehow formed who you are? Because it was I lived all over the place because my parents had been divorced, and then you know how back in the day people, as they were coming up, would move from a tenement to whatever. Do you think the South End formed some of your...
I would say some of my friends when I was younger probably helped me along in that direction because they could draw, and I was interested in drawing, and they probably drew better than I did back then. But they dropped away from it, and I stayed with it because it appealed to me. So, I mean, a lot of good things come out of the South End of New Bedford. I mean, it's got some negative connotations, but I don't think it's all negative. There's a lot of good things come out of the South End. It's a beautiful place. It really is. You have the water on both sides, on East Rodney French and West Rodney French, and you couldn't ask for a better location to watch sunrises and sunsets.
Well, as you know, when we were kids, it was kind of like a resort community. After it kind of dropped off just around Hazelwood Park, it dropped off, and there was the Poor Farm was about the only big thing there, and then there was the fort.
Right.
And it was primarily like just big open space.
It was nice, you know. Now it's all closed. There's houses everywhere. A little bit of the Poor Farm still exists, right behind the duck pond.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to walk my dog there when I had her a couple of years ago. You know, but it's sad because when I was a kid, this Poor Farm building was no longer being used, but it was falling into disrepair. We used to go in there and explore it and hang around. All the fields down the street were still there. Fort Rodman was a fort. You couldn't go in there. It was an army base,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But we did sneak in there and go in the bunkers. There's underground channels you wouldn't even know about that the kids in that area knew all about. And it's closed in a little bit since then, you know.
I went by there the other day, and I noticed a lot of the batteries are gone. Those big mounds of earth. They took them out. Or
As far as I know, they were overgrown, and I did some paintings when they were overgrown because they were very picturesque. But then they decided to cut all the underbrush and all the grass, and then they were just mounds of dirt.
Yeah.
I haven't been down there recently, but I don't think that they've taken them out.
All right, maybe because they just cleaned them up or something.
They cleaned them up,
Yeah.
but I think things are starting to grow back there. I'm not sure if they kept up with it.
Right.
I used to walk my dog down there all the time, but I have my girlfriend's dogs. I'm up the West End with that dog all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep meaning to bring him down here and go around the fort and like I used to, but that's coming up. I had to get past the hot weather.
Yeah. The other thing that was down there when we were growing up too was Beetle Cat. The
Beetle House on Aquidneck Street.
Yeah.
There were a lot of those houses. There was a Devlin house on Clara Street. Then there was another house down the bottom of Frederick Street in the woods there before they put in the hurricane barrier. And I forget the name of the family that lived there, but they were all abandoned, except for the Devlin house. That was a couple of houses down from me, and there was a big fields around it.
Mm-hmm.
They tore it down, and they're all kind of different houses there now. So that's all gone.
The Butler family on Butler Street, and there was the Butler Mills. I don't know if they were all related, but again, it was a very, very interesting part of the city to live in. Where did you go to school?
New Bedford school system. Taylor School up the street, Roosevelt Junior High School, and then New Bedford High.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then for your art training. And
Swain School of Design.
Okay. So let's roll back to the school system. How was your art education there?
I was kind of like doing my art on my own.
Mm-hmm.
When I took courses there, I don't know if I took them that seriously, because I was more interested in being a cartoonist, and they wanted you to draw still lives, and I wasn't interested in that at the time. I wouldn't say I was a good student in that respect, because I was always kind of a rebel in what I wanted to do. I don't think I really decided that I was absolutely going to be an artist till I was like 18 years old, and I needed to go to Swain School, so I had to go in a military. It was a dangerous time to be in the military.
That was during the Vietnam era.
Right. And luckily I didn't have to serve in Vietnam, but I did get the GI Bill money to pay for Swain School. That's how I got through.
Mm-hmm. What was your duty, your branch in?
I was in the Navy, and I ended up serving my time in Washington, D.C., of all places.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
There was a National Gallery of Art was right across the river, and so I got access to one of the better museums in the country, and
Yeah.
that kind of influenced my decisions on art by seeing all these great masters as often as I wanted to.
Yeah.
You know,
Coming back into New Bedford, going to the Swain School. Now, what time period was this with the Swain School?
72 to 76.
And how was the school back then? I mean,
No, it was great.
you're
It was
probably the fifth, sixth Swainey that we've had on this podcast. What was so great about it?
Small. It was just. It wasn't huge, so you had a very small group of students, And when I got there, I was amazed at how well these kids ahead of me could draw. I thought I was something when I saw what they could do. I was like amazed that I had to really put my effort in to get up to snuff, and I really did. And I still do to this day. You know, I always take it serious, to practicing and practicing and practicing to stay on top of my skill level. Mm-hmm. But it was just a very nice environment. Everybody got along with everybody else, and you know, it was people would visit each other in the different houses they were staying in, and little parties we'd have, and just a very good sense of a community there.
Who are some of your instructors?
The one that stands out to me is David Smith.
David Loeffler Smith?
Right. He was like, you know, the senior person there that I had a lot of respect for, you know. I mostly feel a lot of artists that are good are self-taught because they're self-motivated. And so they go out on their own. They don't need people teaching them. They just need to be mentors there to help them along as they're moving along. And a lot of people would fall by the wayside. They wouldn't do their work, but I always did my work because I wanted to. I loved it.
So you think it's somewhat of a work ethic?
So work ethic, absolutely. Absolutely.
So being self-taught but with guidance versus, I mean, because I remember...
Self-motivated.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I remember when I was 14, the first oil painting I ever did was of the farm up in Quebec, the province of Quebec in Canada. And, you know, those books that used to buy at Fuller's art store, you know, trying to figure out how to do this stuff. And then going into college and finally getting some instruction, it made it a lot easier. But I think you're right. I think you're right about the effort.
It wasn't only the teachers, which like I say, it was more like a guidance. Because they're not going to sit there and draw on your drawing and show you how to do it. It was the other students that you were in competition with. You know, you wanted to get to the top of the heap. It's kind of like a competitive nature that I have. I said, I got to beat these people out, or at least be at the top of the hill.
Like a pecking order.
Yeah, I got to be one of the best here. You know, I can't let them be thought of as ahead of me. I got to be at least in the running, and so I had that competitive nature. So that's what really helped me along. You know, try to do the best that I could, just so I would be up at the top of the class. You know.
Did you get there?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I love your face. Too bad this is not video. Who were some of your other instructors while you were there?
Ben Martinez was there. He's still around. Dick Doherty. John Osborne, and the rest of them, I can't remember their names. Those they stand out. I can't remember everybody's name. Nick Kilmer was there. He was mostly in a creative writing class and stuff like that.
How about your classmates? Can you remember them?
I remember a lot of them.
Don't forget, this is going to become like a historical record, a historical document of some sort.
All right.
So not to put you on the spot, but who was in your class?
My best friend, who I visit all the time, is still a great painter down in Connecticut, Eric Hart. In my class, Gary Rigo.
I taught with Gary Rigo.
Yeah, Gary Rigo. The rest of them, I remember people from the class ahead of me, like Owen Gray and Mike Saccarici, Jim Buzzy, people of that nature. I'd really have to think about that, you know. Because it thinned out as we went along. We started off as freshmen. By the time you get to be seniors, a lot of them were gone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Life intervened in some way, shape, or form, and they were gone.
Of those that you mentioned, beside your friend in Connecticut, are they still practicing artists? Would you say a majority
of them are.
Yeah.
You know, Facebook has a way of reintroducing you to people that you haven't seen in a long time, and you realize that, you know, what they were doing back then. Now they're doing more traditional work. Maybe they were doing some abstract stuff. Now they're more traditional. It's like, I don't know what happened over the years.
Right, or vice versa.
Right. Realists, I maintained my course straight through. There was no deviations for me. But I've seen a few of them. Some of them went into music, you know. different things. A lot of them just disappeared. I have no idea what happened to them.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Now, the artists that influenced you, now people have compared you to Van Gogh, or if you're really cool, Van Gogh.
Van Gogh.
Albert Pinkham Ryder. I mean, I see Bruegel, especially in your crowd scenes.
One of the biggest influences, as far as maybe not the work itself, although some of the work was Reginald Marsh, especially when you get into the figure compositions I do, because he was the one that connected art from the Middle Ages to the modern times. Because when I read about him and saw what he had done, he said, well, the beach in particular was so was the equivalency of the modern compositions from the great masters like Rubens and everything, because you had all these people in almost completely undressed, muscles, beautiful women. You know, then he went on to that was Coney Island series he did. Then he went on to he went to burlesque houses on the streets. And that was a major influence in what I decided to do after I decided not to go to New York and be a comic book artist. I said, I got to do something concerning with life. You just walk out the door, and there it is.
And you've been successful doing that. Could you name some of the dives, the beaches, dives, and there's got to be another category that ballparks.
Well, there's a lot of but also the street scenes in Boston. I went up to Boston. I ended up having jury duty in 1988 on a federal jury duty, and I wasn't too happy about it, but it was a blessing in disguise because I was exposed to these tremendous scenes in Boston of all of these crowds, these buildings with gargoyles and Romanesque columns, and I said, oh my God, I got to do something with this. So that became a whole series that I'm still working on to this day. Downtown Boston, the Boston Common, Newbury Street, Faneuil Hall, all those places. Tremendous potential to do those crowd scenes, and put all my characters into them. So it becomes a comic book story, but illustrations.
The crowd scenes, are definitely a revisited subject matter. You do the Portuguese feast, the Madeiran feast, the largest Portuguese feast in the world.
I did that in the 80s, right.
The Horseneck Beach series, where you've got all these bodies around.
Rubenesque, right?
Rubenesque. Also, these was it the Washington Club? Some of these
the Washington
bars
Club,
that don't exist
right,
anymore.
Well, the Washington Club does exist. You could go there to this day. The Fisherman Lounge no longer exists. Yep. Different places like that, just places that I went. And I said, well, this would make a good picture. I'm going to have to start working on getting something together for this.
And how did you do that? Did you do that with Polaroids, or did you start doing sketches?
No, I never even had a camera in those days, I just would do drawings sometimes on napkins. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then when the time I got to the Washington Club, I had a flip phone. I was taking pictures. When people weren't looking, I'd take pictures of the interior and everything. And a lot of times it was just memory and drawings on napkins, believe it or not.
Now, the Washington Club is on what street?
David Street.
David Street. That's off of Purchase, right?
No, David is off of Brock Avenue, and East Rodney French is at the bottom.
So that's why, because like in my head, I always used to get, and I still do obviously, confuse the Mickey Wits.
Right, that's further up the north end.
That's further up the north end. That's the one I was thinking about.
This is South End.
South End. Yeah. What would you say has been your greatest piece of work ever?
That's a hard one to answer. I've done so much work. It's a hard one to answer.
I mean, if it's not, it is to put you on the spot because that's what interviewers do. But I mean, if you had to just choose one to hold on to, and you had to sell everything else, which one would you hold on to? That
would have required a lot more thought. Really, it would have, because the problem with holding on to work is sometimes I've held on to work because I says, I can't sell that. It'll be sold right away, and I'll never be able to get it back. And then when I finally decided I got tired of it and put it out there, nobody bought it. So it wasn't that special, I guess,
Yeah.
I'd probably sell any of them, to be honest with you, because you need the room in the studio to keep working. You know, so if somebody wants to find a home for it and pay for one, I would sell any of them. Now, I can't really say what my greatest work was.
Your work has ranged in size too. I think what the Fenway Park one is probably one of your big ones. That was a triptych, wasn't it?
11 by 5 feet.
11 by 5 feet.
All right.
And then you go down into like a middle ground of
4 by 6 inches. I work. A lot of the small ones are 4 by 6 inches.
So you're using like.
And I've gone smaller than that too.
Wow, you're
2 by 3 inches.
You're dealing with brushes that are like
toothpicks.
Yeah,
I'm not literally
toothpicks.
Literally are toothpicks, not brushes.
Yeah.
Toothpicks.
Have you had a retrospective, Milt?
I had one at not Swain School, Gallery X in October 2015, and that was a tremendous success. I really enjoyed that. Sold a lot of work, and a retrospective makes it sound like you're finished. Doesn't it?
I don't know. Sometimes to me, it's like a stop on the rail line.
I hope so.
You have to stop, take your luggage off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was far from finished. Believe me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Produce probably another whole show, a couple of 15 more shows after that.
Yeah.
But
how did it feel? I guess accolades. People, smacking you in the back, that kind of thing. I mean, the response from
people will respond for something like that. Whereas you might put a picture here and there in a show, and they won't even pay any attention to you. But suddenly you're the whole show, which I don't have any problem doing that at all. And it makes you feel good, of course. Why wouldn't it make you feel good? You're supposed to be communicating with people, and you've been successful at communicating with them. That's what that results in, that you've been successful in communicating what you wanted to communicate to them. And they love it, and they're happy with it, and that's all it's about,
What subject matter really turns on the majority of them, for example?
Landscape painting.
The landscape paintings?
Landscape is consistent all the way through. When I do the figure compositions, that'll be somewhere along the line, I'll suddenly decide I want to do one of those, but it's always landscape painting consistently all the way through.
Now, I've noticed a theme in several of your works where it's you with a walking stick. I'm assuming that's you in the composition, and a dog.
Right.
When you had your dog or dogs.
I still have dogs. I still walk dogs.
And there's an interesting kind of, it's almost like a signature. It's almost autobiographical.
It is, because most of the stuff that I've seen, dogs get you out of the house. They get you out walking. You'd see much of the stuff that I've seen in my paintings I would never have seen if it wasn't for dogs. Because dogs have to be walked constantly, and they're good companions to go out there and hike trails and walk early morning, late in the evening, whenever they got to be walked, and you'll see everything you want to see. And so that's why the theme is so consistent, because of dogs, I've seen more in the landscape than I ever would have seen if I never owned a dog.
And you've also captured moments that a lot of people have only been able to witness in your painting.
Right. Well, it's also the state parks. I worked in the state parks for over 30 years. And when you retire, you have a tendency to not leave the house as often as you did when you were working. This summer I went back and I was supervisor at Demarest Lloyd. So I got out there for another 3 months and was doing it every day, seeing early morning, afternoon, evening. I was always out. And that's the thing I missed about it, Same thing with walking dogs. If you don't have a dog, you're not going to get out of the house, and you're going to have a tendency to just stay in the house most of the time. Yeah. But the dog and a job like that will get you out to see the landscape in all aspects that you'd ever want to consider for doing a piece of work. All the moods of the landscape,
This morning I was out early with my daughter, and it was foggy as all heck. And she said,
I was out with the dog.
Yeah, yeah.
It was dark out, too.
Yeah, it was dark. And when she first looked outside, she said, I think it's snowing. And it was just the way the streetlights were catching the fog. And so then I told her, I said, back when we were in college, there used to be a couple of places out on Gooseberry Neck. And in the summer, it would be so foggy out there that we'd actually have somebody would volunteer to lay over the hood of the car, grab onto the wheel well, and shout directions, more to the left, more to the right, because you could not see your way back.
Pea soup fog.
It was actually pea soup fog, yeah. Sunsets also play a big part in your work.
What was that?
Sunsets.
Oh, sunsets.
And sunrises.
And sunrises, which
Right.
I've been working on the last couple of weeks.
Do we really have, according to some survey or whatever, national survey, do we really have some of the best sunsets and sunrises in the country?
Well, since I live down the South End, if you want to see the sunset, go on West Rodney French.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty of parking there. You can see it right across the Clark's Cove. Sunrises, I just go right down the street. I do it every morning now, and I go over to Butler Street, and I just walk off to the side, and you got a perfect view looking out towards Butler Flats Lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no obstructed view, and you can see the fishing boats coming in with their lights and everything. And the other day I was there, you had the crescent moon right above. It looked like ready made for a painting. It was all set to go.
Yeah.
And then you get clouds. If you don't have clouds, it's not quite as nice. It's just a kind of a plain sunrise. So I've spent a lot of time recently, last couple of weeks, down the bottom of the street watching this pre-sunrise, not the sunrise, pre-sunrise. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine why we wouldn't. I don't know. I've never been anywhere else to watch the sunrise, but here I can tell you they're beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. It is a beautiful part. I mean, we live across the harbor in Fairhaven, and in only like 5 minutes, actually on just looking down Farmfield Street, we can see straight into the ocean on some days.
Right.
Well, they're not the ocean, but the outer harbor.
Right. Buzzards Bay.
Buzzards Bay,
yeah.
And it's really so that does get in your head as a painter.
Oh yeah, yeah. Since I lived down there my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
When you wanted to think about sunrise and sunsets, you didn't have to drive anywhere. You were right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand what you mean. I remember when I was at the University of Miami, I would say I was very frustrated. It's like you couldn't get away from yourself. And if you wanted to be someplace like here, we're so spoiled. We just walk a little bit or drive a very, very short distance and we're alone because we have all these beaches. Down there, it was frustrating. There's people everywhere. You couldn't get away from anybody. Yeah. It's a total mess. What's if a young person came up to you and said, "I want to be a painter, just like you," what would you say to them?
I would say if you want to be a painter like me, you should be a painter like yourself, not like me. You should figure out your own path. I could show you what I do, and you can be inspired by what I do, but you need to blaze your own trail, right? Mm-hmm. That would be my take on it. I wouldn't want anybody just following blindly after me. Mm-hmm. They should use me as an inspiration to strike out on their own and take their own path.
Yeah.
Because being an artist is about being an individual, not following trends, but finding something new on your own. Exploring, life or whatever inspires you on your own without somebody else having undue influence on you.
And that's one thing about your work. It is individual. There are probably people compared to you versus you being compared to somebody else, which is quite a feat as a painter.
Well, like I said, I made the effort right from the beginning, and I practice every day, and I take it very seriously. Mm-hmm. But, I love doing it. It's not like it's hard for me to do it. I love it. You know, if you love something, you're going to pursue it constantly.
Yeah.
And so that's what keeps me on course. I love doing it.
And now, your girlfriend's dad was also a painter.
Right.
Did you ever get a chance to meet him? And
I didn't meet him, but around his paintings because she had a collection of them, and we still have those.
Can we mention his name? You feel
yeah.
Francisco Raposa.
Right. You got me drawing a blank. Yeah. You got me talking about myself. I forgot about other people.
And all of a sudden,
he was very linear in his work. You know, he was not a painterly artist, but he did some of the most amazing things I've ever seen, especially in scrimshaw. I couldn't believe what I've seen. A very accomplished and skilled artist.
He was my high school drafting teacher.
Was he? Yeah.
Along with my high school art teacher.
All right.
And he came from the old school where they had certain things that they learned. It was like a toolbox. And he was just kind of amazed that we came up through the school system to high school and we didn't know any of these things. And he was very, very, very incredibly supportive. I think it was because of him that I continued to go on.
Right.
So going back to the Swain School and some of the instructors that you had there, like David Loeffler Smith, what would you say what did you get from him other than support and guidance and,
He was just maybe even a fatherly figure, I guess, because we were young in those days, just somebody to keep you on course. He had tremendous knowledge of art history, and he was always making suggestions on what you should think about when you're doing these things. You needed somebody there steady to keep a steady. And like I said, I was mostly believed that an artist, as any worth his salt, is self-trained, because he's inspired to go learn by himself, to go to the museums and look at the work and see how somebody else did it and get up close and see what everything looks like up close. Because it doesn't seem that intimidating when you look at it up close, because you can see how they made the brush strokes, etc. He was just a steady hand on the wheel to keep you going forward. And I even consulted with him after I left Swain School many times. Then he moved, I think, up north. I don't know if he went. I don't know if he went over to UMass Dartmouth when Swain School collapsed, and I call it a collapse because it was a financial problem.
Well, you're the first one of the Swain students to use that term. Me, from my side of the table, I feel that those of you who endured that changeover, that collapse as you call it, it was like you were gut shot. And it's a pain, it's an emotion that you guys still carry to this very day, and that really intrigues the heck out of me.
Right, Swain School, in a way, it had a limit. It was there for such a long time, and then it suddenly ended. And so it's almost like if you're from Swain School, and there is no more Swain School, that's the limit of the people that were there. And it's not like it doesn't go on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a badge of honor to have been there,
So the continuity was stopped. There is no continuity in a way.
It moved over to UMass Dartmouth.
Right.
I don't know what happened over there because I was long gone. Mm-hmm. But some of the instructors went over there, and they were fine, damn good instructors, like Zig Haynes. Mm-hmm. We had some of the best instructors at Swain. I didn't work with Zig Haynes. He came sort of towards the end of my time there.
Right.
But I know he's a damn good painter. I love his work. But when I say the collapse, I mean I think it was just fiscal mismanagement that did it in, and it should never have happened. It should have been there till this day. It's a really sad thing.
I mean, for us,
it was an institution in this city.
Yeah, it was. And for us at SMU, we did get some of the folks from Swain that came over, Ed Tonieri specifically. I've got to get to the bottom of that story. But it was also for us like a family. And then when they changed over to UMass Dartmouth, it took a long, long time to wrap our heads around saying UMass Dartmouth. It just didn't seem. It's. I guess it's like having step parents that you don't really can't really cozy up to, and you just can't be that person they want you to be. But what's amazing though is this kind of camaraderie that existed in just those two art schools alone. Because when we were at SMU, it was just an art school or a department of art. There was no College of Visual and Performing Arts. What was the greatest takeaway from Swain? We've talked about Swain a lot, but what was the biggest takeaway?
Well, like I said, it was very tight-knit community, and there's so many different eras within that 4 years that I was there that I can think of. That, like I said, things thinned out at the end in my class, but just the friendships and everything that I developed there. The lifelong friendships. Like I said, I just came from visiting somebody who was in the same studio with me at the Melville building for the final 2 years of my time at Swain. Mm-hmm. And just the fact that they really seem to emphasize and give you an opportunity to do good work, not go off on tangents and everything. Mm-hmm. They stayed with the fundamentals basically there, and that's what I liked about them, because that's what art is all about, the fundamentals, and you work your way up from that. Mm-hmm. It's a very solid form of art education, very solid. Give you a good foundation, There was nothing off the rails,
The Melville house. Now that was Herman Melville's sister's house, the one on the corner of Madison and.
I'm not sure what the origin.
And Orchard, the Orange House. I think it's been Orange for years, right?
It's still there, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard stories of it being haunted.
Yeah. It is.
Any experiences secondhand or firsthand?
I heard some footsteps one time when I was upstairs on the third floor, and I could never explain what they were because nobody ever showed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But other people had experiences there that they related to me, and they seemed to especially believe the kitchen was haunted compared to the other areas. But it was, spent a lot of time there, and just one experience doesn't make it,
right.
Doesn't make it stand out that much. Right. It was just a good place, we spent a lot of time there. We'd spend nights there, mm-hmm. drawing and painting. And you used to be bringing a little TV because you didn't need a digital converter in those days.
Yeah, just rabbit ears.
Right. And just did a lot of work there. Spent a lot of time there. It was a nice place.
Now, a couple of doors up to the east, which eventually became the Swain president's home.
The Rodman building?
No, that's on County. It was on the same side of the street. It was on the south side of the street, and it was a couple of doors, like I said, to the back to the south, to the east. At one time, that was the president, I believe, of the Aerovox, Myron Owen's house. Yeah. And the art collection in that place was staggering. Absolutely staggering. I don't know if that collection stayed with the house, if it was part of the bequest when it went over to Swain. But my God, if it did, that alone would have been enough to keep the school out of debt. There may be a story there or not.
I'm not sure because David Smith was in a house. I'm not sure if that was his house. I used to visit him there.
It was an Italianate house, and I believe there was on the north side of the house there was a punch out for like a studio, because there's only two places in the city I remember that had that kind of punch out for a studio for the skylight, the artist skylight, that there, and Berthium's, which is just up the street here on Rivet Street. Berthium's photography studio had one. Yeah. It was all copper, and they took it out. There's another question that I have for you. In a lot of your paintings, when you're walking, the terrain seems not mountainous but hilly, and you always seem to be on top of the hill. And there are occasions where you are at the bottom in the valley or whatever, but for me, it's not just a composition. For me, it's some sort of a statement. Or I could be totally off off the mark here?
There's probably a compositional device to draw attention, because you have to draw attention to a certain area of the picture and have everything else be subservient to that, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you want a centralized location where people can focus in. Kind of learned that from Rembrandt. You look at his pictures, he's got one area which is heavily impastoed or detailed, and then he kind of like trails away from it, and it just kind of like more important in the sense that central area. You want to draw people's eye to that,
Right.
So you have somewhere to focus. And
it's also for scale too. I mean, because now they've got the figure in the landscape, and they can scale from that figure.
It would work for scale.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Now, nature. Do you find it something to be battled with? Something that gives comfort to? Your relationship to nature, and what are you trying to say to the viewer about nature?
For me, nature is always about moods. Even if I'm not painting, I'll drive around on certain days. It'd be cloudy or like a grayish day, and I'll be in a certain mood. The sunny, beautiful day, depending on what time of the day it is, will put me in a different mood. And if I'm trying to convey anything, I'm trying to convey those moods, because that's what nature is, moods.
Yeah. Now, the other aspect is your street scenes, the churches that you paint. There's a lot of nights. You've done a lot of night scenes as well,
right.
And snow. And to me, because we're approximately the same age and we grew up in a New Bedford of the same era, there's just something like incredibly warm and comforting, and I can, in one of your paintings, I can smell the incense from the incensorium. I was an altar boy, and I can smell that, and I can feel the place. It's nicely weird, I guess, or maybe I'm just weird, but it's nice.
Are you talking about the churches?
Yes, yeah. You did St. Anthony of Padua.
I have a great admiration for the skill and level of skill that they put into those churches, the craftsmanship, the artisans that had to work on those.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really see that nowadays, but they're very beautiful the way they put together, so solid, with the granite and everything. I mean, it just seems like it's a trip back in time, especially.
Yeah.
To the time of the Impressionists. Because when I got into the snow scenes, it was the Impressionists. They got me into that.
Mm-hmm.
And once I discovered that I wanted to do snow scenes, because I'd never been successful with them before that, and I had this book called The Impressionists at Snowfall. I got up from Barnes & Noble up there at the up in North Dartmouth Mall.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't wait to get started, and then it wouldn't snow.
Yeah, that's always the case, right?
Yeah. And I says, I can't, I was chomping at the bit to get going, and it wouldn't snow, and it finally started snowing. And I finally got underway, and, and I was successful with them. I really had a different approach to it, and I was really successful with them, using them as my inspiration, the Impressionists. And I think they did snow like nobody else. Monet and Sicily, Renoir, Pizarro, they really did capture snow and those effects. And I was so much wanting to do that's what sent me into it. And the churches, that brings it back to you don't see stuff like that being built nowadays.
They were sanctuaries. I mean, don't forget the belief system is totally, I guess, collapsed in some ways from an organized, religion is an organized activity. Spirituality and belief are part and parcel too, but they're also apart, from. And there was also the tradition. I mean, Catholics or Christians, I can only go from the Catholic thing. This time of year, Advent, and there was, on this day this happened, on this day this happened, and there was a continuity. There was a tradition. There was you just never. When unexpected things happened, yeah, they were unexpected. That's why you call them unexpected. But then you had the solace, I guess, of knowing that things just went on. You dealt with it and it just moved on. Today, it's like, I don't know if you remember that old cartoon, Ricochet Rabbit. Bing, bing, bing. I mean, it's like everything is like zinging and zagging and doing crazy stuff.
Things don't seem to be the same as when we were kids. You know, everything seemed to be organized more.
That's the word.
Seems to be, you know, families and everything else is like you said, it's kind of like all over the place now. Everything was organized in those days. You got up, you went to a certain school. They even sent us to Monday school. After Sunday school, we got older. We had to go to Monday school, and we had to go to So we left school, got in the bus, and went to another school.
Now, what denomination?
This was St. James, which is now.
You're a Catholic school?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's now Our Lady of Guadalupe or something like that.
Right. They've changed. I don't think they changed the name. I think they just added that on.
Yeah.
And we had to go, and the nuns would now going to school us in religion, you know what I'm saying? And they were far meaner than the regular public school teachers. Yeah. So you had to know whatever they required you to know.
Yeah. I still remember Sister Therese Annesley from school, from Immaculate Conception.
Yeah, it was, and that went on till confirmation. It was kind of an organized thing you had to be involved in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they handle that to this day, but like I said, for me, it's the churches themselves. You can say what they stand for, but it's also the great beauty and the great skill that went into building those things. Those things must be preserved.
Yeah. You
know, and people are starting to go away from it. They don't have money to take care of these things. They just tore down St. Anne's, you know.
I know. I served Mass there at 5 o'clock in the morning.
It's gone, and they've already started building the new structure there.
I remember what they referred to as the Job Corps riots, which were in the mid-'60s. I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing like walking with your cassock and surplice on a coat hanger, walking to go to church, and there's this crowd of people coming at you. I never got bothered, but it was kind of frightening. You know, it was kind of frightening. One last question. In one of your winter scenes, snowplow. Snowplow now seems like it's another entity in there in the piece of work.
I plowed a lot of snow in the state parks.
Okay.
I was constantly, during the winter, we had to plow all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was there to this day, we'd still be plowing. But of course, it hasn't snowed yet. But the job became bigger and bigger and bigger because the staff became smaller and smaller and smaller. So you had more and more places you had to plow. So I'm very, very familiar with plowing snow. And as a matter of fact, my last year at Horseneck, I was alone. And I would just plow that area. But I'd bring my notebook and my watercolors with me, and I'd stop partway through and paint.
Yeah.
And then I'd move on and do some more. Then I'd stop and paint because those notebooks are like souvenirs of my having been there. When I look through those notebooks, I can remember what happened that particular day, that night, you know. And
any chance of ever getting those notebooks scanned and publicized?
If somebody wants to do
published,
it,
rather?
Yes, it costs some money. I mean, I was just going through them the other day. I couldn't believe the amount of work that I've done in the notebooks alone.
I really think, Milton, not because you're here, but I think a lot of people feel the same way, that not only are you a painter of institutions, and that institution can be a specific location, a specific neighborhood, a specific theme, a bar, but you also have, you have become an institution on your own. That's that diligence that you talked about from art school.
If you make a big enough effort in something, and like I said, it's an effort, but I love doing it, so it's not that hard for me to get involved doing this. I do it every day. I love doing it so much that I never stop doing it. If you become an institution, that's fine. At least you accomplished something in your life and left something behind.
Yeah. Are you I'm going to ask you, these questions just coming off the top of the mind. So, are you happy enough?
Am I happy enough?
Yeah.
With what I've accomplished?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Are you rich enough?
Of course not.
Are you successful enough?
Not nearly.
And
I wish more people
success
would,
mean to you? Is it sales?
It's sales and getting not only the sales, but getting the paintings in somebody else's possession who is going to take care of them so I can produce more. That's the important part, somebody to take care of them, because I'm not going to be around forever, and I need people to take care of these and keep moving forward with these when I'm gone.
So on that note, Milt, when you're gone, what do you want to be remembered for?
I hope that my work would be, sort of like a school of art that people would appreciate and remember that somebody actually sat down and paid attention to things in life and tried to do something with it to leave behind for people to enjoy, to give them some happiness in their life. Maybe when there's a moment of sadness, they can look at one of those paintings and it will make them feel good,
Have you, and this will be the absolute last question. I keep saying that, but every time you talk, it leads me to something else. Have you noticed any other young artist who's coming up that, and I'm not saying emulates you, but has the same themes that they're recording? What you've done is you've recorded not just emotions, of man and nature, or of neighborhoods, or of watering holes.
There's an artist. I don't know if he's young. I got to go visit him in his studio. I don't know if you ever heard of Roy Rosso.
No.
He paints a lot of night scenes down by the docks.
What? Roy Rosso?
Right. I think it's ROSSOW. You can see it.
Rosso. Okay.
Right, you can find him on Facebook.
Yeah.
He's got a show right now at the New Bedford Art Museum with another artist.
Okay.
And he does some amazing work down at the docks with lights at night. Very mysterious.
That's a show that Don Wilkinson had.
Right. He reviewed it.
Been floored by, yeah.
Right. I was floored by it when I went to see it because the other guy with him is incredible too.
Yeah.
And I forget his name right off the top of my head. But he's doing a lot similar to what I would be doing,
okay.
Roy.
All right.
And he really had zoomed in on it even more than I do because I jump around to different subject matters. He seemed to have zeroed in on that subject matter, and he does some incredibly beautiful, very intensely beautiful work in that area of the docks, the boats, the lights at night.
Yeah. And
he'll go onto the streets of New Bedford and have some of that going on there, and that's somebody I can bring up right off the bat.
Oh, good. Well, Milton, thank you. Milton Brightman, thank you so much for visiting with us. Wasn't that bad, was it?
No. Should have given me more water.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have to get a water pitcher. That's for sure. And as I tell all of our guests, these are by no means, your first visit is by no means your last visit. Because I always feel that in a lot of cases, by the time we get down to the end of the first visit, there's more questions, there's more things that we want to do. And the whole purpose of this is to record these conversations because somebody's going to listen to them. They're going to be inspired by them. They're going to hopefully be awed by them, not me, by the guests. And it's also a historical record. We're filling in these gaps. People wondered, about this, they wondered about that, and now hopefully we've provided some answers. So once again, we're wrapping up another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by theartistindex.com, and I'm Ron Fortier, your host. Until the next time, goodbye, and thank you for listening.